Today on ADG Pro, we're going to be playing some King's Quest, but not in a way you would typically expect. I mean, figuring out how to go for that maximum score sounds like it'd be really fun, and we're actually going to be doing that. But in the process, we're going to be tackling an interesting question. What's the lowest score you could possibly get while still beating the game? Now, to answer this, we first need to understand how exactly the game is keeping score, and that's something which is actually misreported in a lot of FAQs and material that's out there. Now, Sierra's Adventure Game Interpreter engine, which powers King's Quest, actually has quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to scoring, and what's going on internally is different from how I'm about to explain this. But the simplest way to break down how this game is keeping score is to separate things out in terms of events and items. Now, triggering particular events will reward a particular number of points, and having particular items in your inventory provides a particular number of points which are subsequently lost if that item is removed from your inventory. It's important to explain it in this manner for a number of reasons, and there's a couple spots where if you pay close attention to the score counter, you can see this happening in stages, separately losing points from the loss of an inventory item and gaining points from the event that was triggered. Plus it explains why some events are seemingly worth negative points, when in fact they're actually not. It's just that the points received from the event are fewer than the points lost from losing the item used to trigger it. So if we're going to calculate minimum winning score, the first thing we need to do is investigate what absolutely every evented item in the game is worth by carefully monitoring our score as we go around doing things. Right at the start is the castle where King Edward lives, and opening the doors are worth 1 point. Twice. The doors don't lock until you talk to the king and get your quest, so you can get both those points right away if you want to. Otherwise, it's assumed you'd open the doors once at the start of the quest and again at the end. Now, bowing to King Edward is similar in that you can do it twice, though not twice on the same visit, and it's worth 3 points each time. Also, I should point out that you do not need to bow to win the game. A bowing will trigger the ending right away once you're there, but if you wait long enough, the ending can be triggered without having to do so. The next screen over is a rock with a dagger underneath. Now, pushing the rock is worth 2 points, and the dagger itself is worth 5. Also nearby is a big climbable tree. Now, climbing this tree is itself worth 2 points, and up in this tree is one of the 4, quote, treasure items in the game. A huge golden egg is worth 6 points. And in fact, all of the treasure items in the game are worth 6 points, and that includes the golden egg, a golden walnut, a pouch full of diamonds, and a scepter held by the king of the Leprechauns. Now, with the walnut and pouch specifically, if you don't open them up, their contents are never revealed, and they're only worth 3 points each. The treasure items are pertinent because there's a couple spots in the game where hostile creatures will block you unless you can either find a way to defeat or placate them, or give them a treasure. Now, if you give them a treasure, then yeah, they'll go away, but you also lose 6 points from said treasure no longer being in your inventory. The alternatives are to either entice a goat with a carrot to follow you around to a bridge where a troll is keeping you from crossing, and then it headbutts the troll into the stratosphere. And then there's also a rat in a cave where you can give him some Swiss cheese instead. Now, speaking of the goat, said goat likes carrots and could also be killed by throwing the dagger into it. This again leads into some of the confusion involving the scoring. The carrot is worth 2 points, and again the dagger is worth 5. If you give the carrot to the goat, or throw the dagger into it, you seemingly lose 2 points or 5 points respectively. But again, this isn't because of any special event or action or anything, it's simply because you no longer have those items in your inventory. Understanding this means there's a lot of events and actions we can just omit, since they require using up an inventory item, and beyond the loss of that item has no further effect on the score. Now, the goal of the game is to obtain 3 very special treasures. A magic chest, which is always full of riches, a magic shield, which protects its bearer from harm, and a magic mirror, which can foretell the future. All 3 of which are worth 8 points each. So one way or another, we cannot beat the game with fewer than 25 points. 24 for those items, and we do have to open that castle door at least once, so there's an extra point right there. There's also a couple other unrelated things which can happen in the game, which are not required to win, but can make life easier. That's dealing with the witch and obtaining the magic ring of invisibility. The witch's house is an entirely optional area, worth a considerable amount of points if you're going for a maximum score, meaning we can skip this entirely when going for a minimum score. Although it's pertinent to note that if you want to go inside the house, you should eat the house first, as this is not only worth 2 points, but it also reveals if the witch is inside or not. The magic ring, on the other hand, is obtained by talking to an elven girl on this particular screen. Now, if you rub the ring while wearing it, you'll turn invisible for an extended period of time, which will make you immune to all random encounters. Things like the wolf, the ogre, and even the giant, surprisingly. But it's otherwise ineffective against all other non-random encounters, like the dragon and leprechauns. One thing that's nice about the ring, though, is that once you use it and the power wears off, the ring also disappears, meaning you can safely grab it in a minimum score run, so long as you use it up before you beat the game. Similar to the ring, you can also get a protection spell cast upon you by a fairy godmother on this screen here. Now, this spell is worth absolutely no points whatsoever, so it's another option if you're trying to get through particular areas unscathed, but just like the ring, only works against random encounters, so it doesn't help us for avoiding points when going for the magical treasures. Another entirely optional area is the woodcutter's house, but it's another good example of the scoring system in action. The woodcutter has a fiddle you can use to placate the leprechauns, but you can't get it unless you give him and his wife something to eat. Apart from the carrot, anyways. Actually, apart from the magic beans too, which they will accept, believe it or not, which would subsequently put you into an unwinnable state, so don't do that. Instead, what you're supposed to do is give them this magical ceramic bowl, which can be refilled with stew an infinite number of times just by saying the magic word, fill. Now, the bowl on its own is worth 3 points, and it's instead worth 5 points when filled with stew. Now, giving the empty bowl to the woodcutter and his wife is worth 6 points. Casting the fill spell in front of their eyes is worth 2. And giving them the bowl already filled with stew is worth 10. Now, curiously, the dialogue's been written to suggest that there would have been a scoring difference at some point, but I think someone at Sierra probably realized, won't they just see the fill word once they finish the stew and then the end result's the same anyways? So I'm guessing that's why both methods ultimately ended up being worth the same number of points. Anyways, let's talk about getting the magical treasures. First, let's tackle the dragon who's stolen the magic mirror, as this is the easiest item to get back. It only requires that you've obtained the dagger. Now, entering the well for your first time is itself worth 1 point, and diving into the well water is worth 2. The dragon itself can be defeated either by tossing the dagger into it to kill it, or by cutting the bucket off of its rope and splashing the dragon with water to put out its fire breath. Now, killing it's only worth 3 points, which is less than the 5 points the dagger's worth, so you'll be down 2 points overall when you go that route. Whereas splashing water on it is worth 7 points. Now, I know it seems like it's only worth 5, but that's because we lost the water in the bucket, which we can get back very easily. Though when we go back into the well water, our score goes up by 4 points? What? So yeah, see that 158 up at the top? That's not a calculated score. Someone at Sierra figured that was the highest score you could possibly get. But clearly there was an oversight, either on refilling the bucket with water, as the water itself is worth 2 points, or on entering the well water from 2 different directions, as both are independently worth 2 points, as the actual maximum score is 160. Plus, it should be noted that you have to go back through the well water if you kill the dragon, but if you simply extinguish it, the dragon moves a rock out of the way as a shortcut back out of the cave, meaning you don't have to go back through the well water in that instance, but you still could. Again, lots of possible explanations as to why the maximum score is missing 2 points, but I'm pretty sure it's because of this sequence of events right here. Now let's deal with the giant who's stolen the magic chest. Now before we can even face the giant, we have to get up into the clouds, which can be done in one of 2 ways, as can crossing the bridge to reach the gnome, which provides us with the means to ascend into the clouds. For a minimum score, we would absolutely forego the goat and just give the troll a treasure. This gnome puzzle, by the way, is about as inane as it gets, and absolutely no one can be blamed for not getting it right. I mean, I had the official hint book spelling out how to do it when I was a kid, but you're otherwise pretty screwed on this one. Which is fine when going for a minimum score, because in that case, we intentionally want to fail the guess and get the golden key. And when going for a maximum score, though, you need to do this puzzle, and the gnome's actual name is Rumpelstiltskin, but using a backwards alphabet, thus making his name Ifnikov Grog Hperm. You can tell it's a good name because it has grog in it. Actually, no, it's a terrible name, but that's what you have to guess if you want the magic beans. Which, by the way, don't eat them. See, these beans are kind of a gateway into how the game's not actually working the way I described it under the hood, just mostly. The way the AGI engine works, both the adding of an inventory item and the removal of said item have to be manually coded in terms of scoring. Well, going by the logic I've used to explain everything, this is the only item where you can actually lose points by action as opposed to by losing the inventory item. Now, the beans themselves are worth 4 points when you obtain them, but eating them causes you to lose 5 points in total, 4 for the beans and then 1 extra. Furthermore, giving the beans to the woodcutter and his wife causes you to lose 6 points in total, same as if you handed them a treasure. So it kind of goes to show that the actual score tracking is way more complicated than I'm making it sound. But as far as I can tell, these beans are the only item in the game that function contrary to the generalizations I've been doing. So I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that. Now, if we plant the beans and climb the beanstalk, which is a freaking nightmare to do, by the way, then that's worth 6 points, whereas using the golden key to unlock the stairway into the clouds is worth 2 points. Now, once up there, we absolutely want to get the slingshot, and if we intend to kill the giant, we also need the pebbles from the riverbed down near the castle. Now, similar to the dragon, killing the giant is again only worth 3 points, and it's worth 7 points if you find a way to wait him out to exhaustion, causing him to fall asleep. Either way, you do not have to take the beanstalk back down. You can just take the staircase and save yourself the trouble. Finally, there's the Leprechauns and their king who's stolen the magic shield. Now, before we visit them, when going for a maximum score, we want both the cheese from the witch's house and the woodcutter's fiddle. While when going for a minimum score, we only need to bring a treasure item with us. Now, up on this screen with the cave is a bird which will sometimes appear. Now, jumping into its talons will carry us over to the island where the leprechauns live. Now, before we go down that hole, though, be absolutely certain to grab the mushroom off to the west, otherwise, you're never getting back out. Down in the hole, we first come up to a rat demanding a treasure, and placating it with cheese is worth 4 points, giving it a treasure is worth nothing. Following this, though, is where the leprechauns live. Now, if you play the fiddle, they'll immediately leave you alone, and the king will also go off to dance with his followers, leaving his scepter behind, which you can also grab. If you don't play the fiddle, but have a 4-leaf clover on you, they'll stay clear of you, and you'll still be able to get the shield, but you won't be able to fetch the scepter. Without either, they'll chase after you, and it's game over if they catch you. However, with some clever dodging, you can still grab the shield and escape, but it's definitely more difficult doing it that way, but also necessary if we're going to go get the lowest score we can. So during my initial run, I was going for a maximum score and checking all the possibilities to ensure I wasn't missing anything. Thus, I got back to the castle, bowed to King Edward, and my final score was 159? Wait, what? Should be 160. And that means I'm somehow missing something that's worth 1 point? Huh. Well, after digging around a bit, I discovered an interesting holdover and something I didn't actually know about the game, because I never played its very original PC Junior incarnation. Remember that ceramic bowl we found? When we look at it in our inventory, we can see the word fill in the bowl plain as day. But back in the very original release of the game on the PC Junior, these little item graphics didn't exist. So looking at the bowl wasn't enough to learn about the fill command. You had to actually type in, quote, read bowl to read what was written inside. And that action itself is worth 1 point. So yeah, that's an extremely easy thing to miss given the addition of the item graphics in the later releases of the game. But in any case, with everything said and done, this was the table of scores I ended up with. Though I didn't find out about giving the magic beans to the woodcutter and his wife until later, so you won't see that on here right away. The next thing I did after making this scoring chart was to try and figure out what needed to be done for both a maximum score run and a minimum score run, and what I initially came up with was this. Any events marked in blue needed to be performed for a maximum score run, anything in red for a minimum score, and anything in purple needed to be done for both. Now, any items marked in this manner needed to be in my inventory, while I used diamonds to indicate that obtaining the item was required for a particular run, but that you would not end the game with it. Thus, based on all of this, I determined the minimum winning score would be a mere 51 points. So it was time to test that theory. I started a run through the game with the intent to do exactly what I set out to do in my score chart, though I did discover along the way I made a couple of mistakes. The first mistake I made was forgetting that if you kill the dragon with the dagger, it doesn't have a chance to open the shortcut out of the cave, thus you have to go back through the well water, which in turn means getting an extra 2 points, thus raising my minimum score calculation to 53. The other mistake I made was more benign, as I thought the magic ring would protect me from the leprechauns, but it didn't. But since I could just use it up anyways, grabbing it was of no consequence, and thus that mistake wouldn't have an effect on the final outcome. Ultimately, I reached the castle with 53 points, and sure enough, after waiting in front of the king for a bit, he keeled over, I took the throne, and there I am with a mere 53 points, ascended to rule over all of Daventry. Let's quickly go over my logic for all of this. You absolutely need to open the door to the castle at least once to win the game. The dagger is also absolutely necessary to get the magic mirror, whether you use it to kill the dragon or cut the bucket from the rope. And one way or another, you need to go into the well, and you need to access the well water from both directions, whether by choice when going for 160 points, or because you have no other way to go when going for 53. Now, killing a dragon is worth less points than throwing water on it, so we definitely want to go that route. In terms of getting the chest, opening the door to the staircase and killing the giant were the only events worth points that we needed to do. In terms of just getting the leprechauns at all, we need to take the bird to get there, and we need to escape through the tiny hole at the end to get back to the normal parts of the game. In terms of items, 5 items we collected but do not end up keeping are the mushroom, which we need to eat to become small and escape the realm of the leprechauns, which is worth 3 points and must be done. We end up using the pebbles to slay the giant. The dagger we lose when we toss it into the dragon, and we collect both the golden walnut and pouch of diamonds to barter our way past the troll and the rat. We do not go for the golden egg because climbing the tree would be worth 2 points. Nor do we go for the scepter because we need the fiddle for that, which would get us lots of other points. Then we don't want that. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, we literally beat the game with just 5 items still in our inventory. The 3 magical treasures, the slingshot, and the golden key, and that's it. So I have to say, this was quite the fun episode to put together, because being able to play a game like this in an unintended yet challenging way is one of the reasons why I like going back to old games and replaying them over and over again. I'm not necessarily always trying to win, rather I want to see what I can do with the game to find my own fun, and going for a minimum winning score is absolutely one way to do so. Now obviously, this isn't going to be challenging or even plausible with quite a number of other games out there, given the large number of games which reset your score to 0 under certain conditions, notably using continues. But for any game where scoring is fixed and predictable, trying to find a minimum winning score is absolutely a viable challenge, which can add replay value to a game you never thought you'd get more out of. Anyways, that's all for today's episode of ADG Pro. Next week for ADG Mod, things are going to get a little brutal. And let's just leave it at that, as I'm sure a bunch of you already have a pretty good idea of what that means. Thanks for watching, everyone, and extra special thanks to those of you supporting me on Patreon. Here's just a small random selection of you all.